Evil. To be profoundly immoral and wicked. There are, on average, 1.3 million violent crimes in the U.S. annually, 800,000 assaults, 90,000 rapes, and 15 to 20,000 murders. Murderers are not monsters, they're men. And that's the most frightening thing about them. Alice Sebold. Megan, a licensed mental health professional, and her husband, Paul, a police officer, sit down to examine and discuss the nature, the impact, and most importantly, the origins of evil.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Paul Braun.
And I'm Megan Braun.
And this is The Origins of Evil, a podcast about just the most vile people on the planet and what makes them tick. So this is our premiere episode. You guys are in on the ground floor, episode number 1. I think some introductions are in order. What do you say?
I agree. So I am Megan. I'm Paul's wife, first and foremost.
That's honestly the most important thing that you are.
That's pretty much my personality. I have no other interests or, there's nothing else I care about.
We don't even know what the word agency means in this house.
I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New York. I've been a therapist for the past 4 years, although it feels so much longer than that because I've, been doing it forever with school and internships and whatnot. But I have worked with a variety of people. I've worked with individuals who struggle with substance use disorders. I have worked with the homeless population. I've worked with veterans. I've worked with the forensics population,
If you don't mind me asking, what is the forensics population?
So when I say forensics population, I'm talking about individuals, that have either current or a history of legal issues. I have worked with anyone who has open cases due to drug crimes or DUIs. I have also worked with murderers.
I was about to say, I know you can't give names, HIPAA,
right?
But just a simple yes or no. Have you worked with any famous murderers? Just a yes or no. I know you can't give any names.
So yes, I have.
Okay, that's awesome. It's not awesome because somebody got killed, but it gives you some credibility. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most.
Yeah, I just want street cred and to be, recognized and popular.
Oh, God. I hope you're all getting an idea what this dynamic is going to be like. When you click on a podcast, because you're like, oh, look, 2 professionals discussing a matter. And it's like, oh, God, but they're idiots. So my name is Paul Braun, as previously stated. And what is my background? What is my relevance to this subject matter? Well, I work in law enforcement. I have been doing this for the last 5 years in the state of New York. I'm not going to specify where for reasons. Let's just say it's on an island that is on the longer side. Kind of looks like fish. Doesn't matter where, though. And in my time working, I have dealt with all kinds of people. I have seen all kinds of things. Honestly, enough dead bodies for a lifetime. But I feel that between my boots on the ground knowledge of these kinds of crimes and your background in mental health, that we might have something interesting to contribute to this world of true crime.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm excited to do this podcast. Number one, because I love true crime and I'm very, very much intrigued by it. And 2, because I do have a background in mental health and human behavior, I'm excited to add my little, psychological commentary to it. And, I'm also excited to learn about what other mental health experts have said about the cases that we're going to present and, whether I agree with them or disagree with them. I'm excited to do some psychological nerd talk.
Yeah, and I'm all ready to do that whole law enforcement spiel and I'm pumped to just give maybe some additional information as to why law enforcement does certain things, or maybe point out good tactics when they happen, perhaps criticize some very poor tactics when they happen. And we
you
will
guys don't
definitely
do anything wrong ever.
That's true. We've no cop has done anything wrong ever, historically speaking.
All right, Paul. So is there anything else you'd like to discuss before you tell me about the case we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, I just wanted to quick go over some of the things that I feel I have to contribute to this little masquerade that we're doing. Obviously, Megan is paramount to this because without her knowledge, we're just kind of pointing at the weird assholes who do these awful things and saying, look at the freak. But there's not really any preventative lessons that we can learn from doing that. My job, unfortunately, is very reactive by nature. It's very hard to stop the crime before it happens. And that's just a function of policing. Whereas with what you do, you can actively stop these things before they occur. You can stop someone from going to the level that I need to get involved.
Well, I mean, that's the goal, is to hopefully identify the risk factors, before they turn into issues, and to help the person learn how to cope and adapt. But I do just want to say, yes, I am a licensed mental health professional, but I have not worked with any of the people that we're going to discuss on this podcast. Or have I? No, but what I'm trying to say is I haven't worked with these people, and anything that I'm not going to get into really diagnosing anyone per se, but I will get into the criteria and risk factors and behaviors and symptomology behind certain disorders that might come up, and to try to, help explain them a little bit better, and to, if you see any of these red flags in your life or with someone that you care about, then hopefully that may encourage you to talk to someone about it. Because again, I think the goal is to just spread awareness because, as you know, in the case we're about to talk about, which we haven't announced yet, there seemingly were no red flags to anyone going through this individual's history. I would still say there really weren't a lot, but there were things looking back at now that I would say, oh, okay.
When you have the context of, oh, he killed a bunch of people, it kind of recontextualizes a lot of his early behaviors and makes you realize oh, we, in some level, could have seen this coming.
The problem is it's someone could also be like this person at that age and grow up and not do this.
Yeah.
And not have the...
In fact, I would argue
suspected
that
diagnosis, yeah.
Most sociopaths don't kill people.
Yeah, the good ones.
The ones who are good at it?
Are there good sociopaths?
Yeah, high-functioning sociopaths. Probably make great doctors or businessmen.
I think the ones that, or presidents, I think the ones that are able to manage their behaviors are, the ones that kind of blend into society. But, that's a conversation for another day. And we don't necessarily know that the person that we are talking about is a sociopath. Yes,
that is a big topic of discussion. And let's just jump into it right there.
Who are we talking about today, honey?
Family annihilation. 2 words that should never appear next to each other. Something about the abhorrent nature of familicide captures the mind share of this nation. Unfortunately, we have seen this happen again and again, from John List and Andrea Yates to Scott Peterson and Long Island's own Ronald DeFeo Jr.
Represent? Not just kidding. He's a terrible representation of Long Island.
Yeah, no, most of us don't.
No, we don't associate.
Don't shoot our entire family somehow without anyone waking up suspicious, perhaps. The Amityville humor for everyone in the room. Today's subject is just one of the latest in a long and putrid line of sick fucks to commit this heinous crime. Our subject is Chris Watts, A man in the loosest sense of the word, responsible for the murder of not only his wife Shannon and 2 daughters, Celeste and Bella, but his unborn son, Nico, as well. What possible motivation would drive him to this crime? Before we get to that immensely unsatisfying answer, we will start at the beginning. But first, we're going to acknowledge today's sources. The book My Daddy is a Hero, How Chris Watts Went from Family Man to Family Killer by Lena Derhaley. American Murder, a fantastic documentary consisting entirely of first-hand clips with no narration or talking heads on Netflix. We'll also have the links to 2 separate articles that give us pretty concise timelines of the events. There are also various YouTube videos of the interrogation and body cam footage. Christopher Lee Watts was born on May 16, 1985 in Spring Lake, North Carolina, to mother Cindy Watts and father Ronnie Watts. I also just realized that his full name is Christopher Lee Watts, and Christopher Lee is an awesome actor.
And would never do this to his family.
No, not to his family. He probably killed some people, though, because he was in the army. He was a tough motherfucker. You know, he got stabbed.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he got stabbed, and they cut him out of the 3rd Lord of the Rings movie, and he took it with stride. He also has a sister, Jamie Lynn Williams. Now, there isn't too much relevant information out there about his life growing up. From what we can tell, there weren't any red flags, no animal torture or shit like that. So we're just going to jump ahead to 2010, when Chris and Shannon met via Facebook, of course. That's going to be a reoccurring entity throughout the entirety of the story. Facebook and social media, so much of this was documented by Shannon. And I quote, "I got a friend request from Chris on Facebook." This is taken from a video that she posted on Facebook. "I was like, what the heck? I'm never going to meet him, except one thing led to another, and 8 years later, we have 2 kids, we live in Colorado, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me."
Woof.
Best thing that ever happened to her. Little did she know, Chris Watts would be the final thing to ever happen to her. Just 2 years later, they married in Mecklenburg County on November 3rd, 2012. In just 2,109 days, Chris would strangle her to death in their bedroom. She would be 15 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child, Nico. On December 17th, 2013, the 2 welcomed their first child, Bella. And on June 17th, 2015, their 2nd daughter, Celeste, Cece, was born. The family obituary reads as follows. Shannon was so excited to have her first baby girl. She spent every minute thanking God and taking care of her precious gift that the Lord had blessed her with. How she loved and cherished her. Oh, how Shannon was so excited to be able to have another child because of her battle with lupus. She was determined to stay healthy, and with her love for her Celeste, every moment with her was a blessing. June of 2015 is when serious problems started to develop. See, Chris was working for Anadarko Petroleum, and Shannon was involved in an MLM called Thrive. Now, I can't legally call it a pyramid scheme, but you know. So with only one legitimate income, 2 kids, a mortgage, car payments, HOA fees, the couple was barely treading water up until this point. Only $90,000 between the 2 of them, and $36,000 of that was going right into their house. June is when the Watts family filed for bankruptcy. Now, Megan, as you know, many family annihilators are motivated by financial instability, a perceived loss of control, and infidelity. Mm-hmm. Many of those boxes have been checked as of 2015. But the Watts family continued to make things work. One of the unique aspects of this case is the level of first-hand documentation that exists. You see, Shannon was in deep with an MLM, and part of making that work involved a consistent online presence. There is a plethora of videos and posts from Shannon hyping up how great her life was with Chris and the kids, and one thing becomes very apparent with hindsight, and that is Chris's discomfort and disdain in these videos. You can always see the tension as Shannon snips at him, especially, do you remember the one video? Mm-hmm. It was the Christmas one.
Yes. Yeah.
He's dressed as Santa. She's like, well, where's your phone? He's like, oh, I don't have it. She's like, well, go get it. I need it to take pictures. and he's just like almost aloof, like he doesn't really.
Yeah. He just
kind of takes it.
Yeah, you could just tell like he just wasn't into it at all. He wasn't into, documenting his life for all to see, and that, he kind of just did whatever she told him to do.
Now that is interesting because
Unlike my husband.
No, I don't do shit. But that's interesting that you say that he just did what he was told to do, because one of those three things that I listed before is a perceived loss of control. Now, Chris never seemed to really be in control when it comes to the dynamic between him and Shannon.
Yeah, and I think that he kind of had this lost sense of self, right? Like he had everything that everyone tells you in life that you should strive for, right? Like a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, a nice house, a dog,
a decent job.
I feel like he was just kind of going with the flow. Like he wasn't someone that made waves. And I think that his actions are going to speak more to the fact that he didn't make waves as we get more into the story.
So June 11th of 2018, Shannon surprises Chris with the news that she is pregnant with their third child. This is the same month that Nicole Kessinger enters the picture. Nicole was a coworker of Chris's at Anadarko Petroleum. Now, Chris lies to Nicole about the then current state of his marriage. She is under the impression that Chris is in the process of finalizing a divorce from Shannon. So the pair begin a physical relationship in July of 2018. You see, Chris had recently lost a lot of weight, so he stopped wearing his wedding ring. He was afraid that it was just going to slip off his finger. So Nicole had no reason to believe that Chris was being untruthful about his marital status. Why would he lie about that? He seems like such a, just a good, nice guy. June 27th, Shannon takes the kids to visit both her and Chris's parents. Chris would stay at home so the two could spend more time apart. During their time apart, Chris puts things into high gear with Nicole. He is 100% going in hard on this relationship with her. They're going on day trips to Shelby American Collection Car Museum, and they go to the Great Sand Dunes National Park, the latter of which we have video from. Now, what does that signify, like, with that he's doing with her? That he's like beginning this relationship with Nicole, and he's just like so in.
Well, I think, this kind of signifies like, the honeymoon stage of a relationship, right? Where, everything's exciting and everything's new. And I think he's getting, a little bit of a rush from it, from, sneaking around. And it's exciting to have someone that, is into you and like gives you all this attention and, actually cares about your opinions on things. And I'm not saying that I don't think Shannon didn't care about his opinions on things. I just think that Shannon and Nicole had very different ways of showing Chris that they appreciated him. And I think that because Nicole became this shiny new object that, he was just absolutely fixated on, she really helped, give a little boost to his ego.
So before we move forward, I've heard you use this term before. Does the term love bombing apply here in any capacity?
Love bombing is essentially, it can be part of the cycle of abuse, but what it is an attempt to influence a person by demonstrations of attention and affection. So when you're love bombed, you might be with someone that, tells you you are the greatest thing that has ever happened to them. They can't picture their life without you. They're sending you flowers. They're buying you gifts. They are, constantly reaching out to you and wanting to spend time with you. They talk about how special you are and how much you mean to them. At some point, that stops.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound sustainable.
It's not, because as human beings, number one, we don't complete each other.
Tom Cruise fucking lied to me?
Yeah.
Well, I guess he didn't lie to me, right? Who said that? The girl said that, right?
Renee Zellweger. Was she in that movie that I didn't see? Or was that Cuba Gooding Jr.?
No, they're all in that movie.
Okay. Harry McDaniels. It's a classic.
The Tom Cruise classic, Harry McDaniels. Is that the one with the child from Stuart Little, or more importantly, Damn Sea Vampires, Jonathan McLickdick? He got kind of swole, actually. Good for him.
He's a little bodybuilder.
Back to the guy who murdered his whole family.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, it's not sustainable.
It's also just, it doesn't seem genuine either.
Well, it's not. It's about them kind of roping you in, right? Like to show you, like, you know, no one's ever gonna like care about you or love you as much as I do. And then what happens is at some point that positive affection and attention stops.
You know, like I was gonna say this as a joke, but the more we talk about it, the more I realize this is like the first 2 steps of the Dennis system from Always Sunny. Like all joking aside, like he's demonstrating the value. We both know he engages physically. He doesn't get to do the other things because he killed his family, but you know, I mean, Dennis is also supposed to be kind of be a sociopath, but either way. So Chris is just, he's in on this. He's putting all his effort behind it. And back to what you said about his ego getting stroked. When he met Shannon, he was not exactly like the picture of like peak male performance. He was kind of like a fat like dude with glasses and stuff. And suffice it to say, he probably wasn't beating off the women with like a stick. He pursued Shannon. That was very evident that that's how that happened. And he won her over, probably by doing the same shit that he was doing to Nicole. But the key difference is Nicole went after him. You see, he lost, like I said, all that weight. And speaking purely objectively, not a bad looking dude. Got into good shape. It's not out of the realm of possibility that like this is the first time that a girl has ever actively pursued him. And he probably just didn't even know like how to handle that.
Yeah. And it's also like a great distraction from a marriage that he was clearly unhappy in.
Yeah. And, you know, this, I also don't think it's a coincidence that this all starts with the news that like he's going to have another kid, especially because they've had financial troubles before. And now it's like, great, like another mouth to feed, I'm in this hole even deeper now.
Yeah.
It probably explains why he went to the extremes that he did. So while all this is going on, his wife is dealing with some serious shit while staying with Chris's parents. I am referring to an incident known as Nutgate. So in quick summation, while Shannon was at the Watts house, Cindy, Chris's mom, put out food that she knew would trigger Cece's severe nut allergy. And that's the thing, like most nut allergies, they tend to just be severe. I don't feel like there's anyone with like, oh, I have a mild peanut allergy. It's like, no, it usually is like going to just kill you if you don't have an EpiPen, which are prohibitively expensive. So this led to an absolute blowout between Cindy and Shannon, and tensions had always been high between those two. I mean, the fact that Chris's family refused to attend their wedding speaks volumes. This incident, however, seemed to be the breaking point for Shannon, as we can see in text between her and Chris. On the 31st of July, Chris flies out to meet his family. Shannon does what Shannon does, and she takes a happy video in the airport of the girls seeing their dad for the first time in 3 weeks. A happy facade for the world to see. No one watching that video would expect what was to unfold in only a matter of weeks. During the final weeks with Shannon, Chris was cold, distant, and apathetic. He had already emotionally moved on and started investing heavily in a new relationship. He didn't need her for emotional or sexual gratification anymore, and these changes did not go unnoticed. Imagine that you spend a few weeks apart from a loved one, and in that relatively short period, they have a fundamental shift in personality for no discernible reason. Chris has obviously fallen out of love. Shanann can see that, but he won't admit to it, and he can't quantify anything that he is feeling. So instead, he just keeps spouting out this generic bullshit about falling out of love, as if that's something that can happen overnight without provocation. This poor woman was being driven insane by all of this. We can see this in the text that she sent to her friend Taylor. At this point, Shanann and her friend start to suspect that Chris might be being unfaithful. The Watts family finally returns home. In a few days, Shanann will need to travel again for a business trip to Arizona. But before she leaves, things appear to be moving in the right direction. The two had a seemingly productive conversation in which they both agreed to try to work things out. Shanann had gone as far as to not only buy Chris the self-help marriage book, Hold Me Tight, but she also started to plan an Aspen getaway for the two of them. Unfortunately, that book would be found in the trash in the Watts family home. In a chilling bit of foreshadowing, Chris had asked Shanann to postpone the announcement of their baby's gender to the 13th of August, knowing full well that she would never get the chance to share that good news with her friends and her family. So Shanann leaves, and Chris gets another taste of the bachelor life. On August 11th, Chris hires a babysitter for the kids, so he can go to a baseball game with some coworkers. This story, however, was just that, a story, as he had actually taken Nikki Kessinger to a sports bar in Erie, Colorado. Now, it's hard to tell if Chris was getting sloppy or if the knowledge that Shanann would be dead soon just made him apathetic, but either way, Shanann found out about this dinner. You see, Chris used a shared credit card to pay for the dinner, which came out to over $60. Chris was adamant that he had only had a salmon and one beer. But there's no reality that some shitty sports bar in Colorado is going to charge $60 for that. Shanann was notified of this transaction. She called him out on it. Shanann was many things. Stupid was not one of them. August 13th, 2018 at 1:48 in the morning. Shanann returns home from her business trip, several hours late. The flight had been delayed, and that will come into play later. Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson gave her a ride home on the 2800 block of Saratoga Trail after returning back from the business trip. This would be the last time Nicole would see Shanann alive. Her arrival home is captured by her neighbor's security camera as well as the camera on the Watts family doorbell. Shanann went inside and climbed into bed with Chris. She was unaware that lying right next to her was the man that would end not only her life, but the life of all of her children in a matter of hours. She made one final attempt at intimacy with Chris, and he obliged for the first time in months. Soon after Shanann had fallen asleep, Chris exited their bedroom and coldly walked first into Belle's room, then Cece's after. He had taken a pillow and smothered both of them in their beds, one after the other. Less than 24 hours earlier, they were at a family friend's house for a pool party. He then confronted Shanann about the affair with Nikki. The tension between Shanann and his parents, his inability to process his emotions, it all came to a head. This is how you know this guy is a sick fuck, with some seriously repressed resentment towards her. He could have just as easily killed her. That could have been it.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't enough. Instead, he needed to twist the knife with his final verbal confrontation. Only once she was broken down emotionally would Chris wrap his hands around her throat and choke her to death. Now, Chris, he had no defensive wounds. That means that Shanann didn't fight back. And she came off as kind of like a spunky woman. So that's surprising.
I think it just goes to show you how deep in shock she was. That first he confirms her worst fear, right? Like, I'm having this affair, our marriage is over. And like, that's bad enough. And now he is literally taking her life away from her.
Yeah.
You know, it's a total, part of me wants to say she lost the will to live, but I think
as a pregnant woman, I can't imagine.
I
this
can't,
isn't Star Wars Episode 3.
Oh my God, I cried during that scene for 45 minutes after. I don't know why.
Oh my God.
I know I'm a loser. Not that she lost the will to live, but I think she was just so in shock at the events unfolding. I mean, that is a situation where, you know, I think, number one, we don't want to picture ourselves ever being in. But number two, like, if it, like, it's something that you don't know how you're going to react or respond unless it happens to you.
As somebody who's been in many a situation where violence was attempted at me, yes, you do not know how you're going to react until something happens, no matter how much you practice, train for it, or think about it. You just don't. And it's crazy because you and I pretty much have the same read on what happened, because what I felt happened is that the reason she didn't fight back was, I would imagine it's just due to the shock of this seemingly meek pushover of a husband that she had known Chris to be for so long, turning out to be a monster.
Yeah.
That it was just such like a fundamental shift in who he was that she just couldn't reconcile it before she lost consciousness.
Yeah. And I also think, like, you know, she's pregnant too. When you're with child, you are constantly thinking about them. And the first sign of danger, like, your first thought is like, what about my baby? And so I think, you know, trying to process everything he's telling her, processing the fact that, you know, she's being strangled, and also, like, definitely thinking about, like, is there any move I can make where I can get out and, like, my baby gets unharmed? Like, if I fight him, what if I get away, but he, you know, punches or kicks me in the stomach? Like, I can only imagine.
Where are the girls?
Yeah, where are the, like, you know, where are her kids? Like, I can only imagine the thoughts running through her head. And it's hard to, like, prioritize, like, which one do I go after?
Yeah.
What do I do first? Like, what do I do now? And, you know, he was a strong guy. It probably did not take him a very long time for him to kill her.
No, a blood choke, you're talking like 30 seconds before she's unconscious, and another, I don't know, couple minutes until she's dead. Because with that, he's not cutting off the her breathing. He's cutting off the blood supply to her brain. And listen, guys, this is where we're gonna start to get into some really graphic, dark territory. We're not gonna clean this up. It's a hard crossroads to get into, because you're stuck between, you don't want to be disrespectful to the victims, but you also really don't want to whitewash what these people did, because it takes away some of the bite of how horrible they are. So you've been forewarned. We're going to tend to err on the side of just telling you what happened, no matter how horrible it might be. So it's at this point, Shannon loses consciousness. She then passes away. She evacuates her bowels and her eyes fill with blood. Chris wasted no time in starting the next step of his plan, and it was planned. You see, her flight had been delayed about 5 hours. So Chris now needed to move fast. He removed her wedding ring and put it aside. He'd use it later. But as he worked, he would not believe what he was about to hear. Chris was wrapping Shannon's body up when he heard it. The quiet voices of his daughters, Bella and Cece, still very much alive. "What's wrong with Mommy?" asked Bella. Chris would say that Mommy was sick and needed to go to the hospital. These poor girls were so physically and psychologically traumatized from their attempted smothering that they just couldn't grasp what was happening in front of them. Chris dragged Shannon down the stairs, and the children followed, crying and confused. Chris backed his truck up to the garage, something he never does, and then carried Shannon's body out, placing it on the floor of the back seat. He then grabbed his lunch, a rake, a gas can, and a shovel before putting his daughters into the truck. Chris then drove 45 minutes to Survey 319 at his job. That is 45 minutes with a dead body in your back seat, covered in feces, with your daughters sitting on top of it.
Their mother, not, you know, their mother, not even just like I mean, obviously a random dead body would be terrible, but their mother is lying dead beneath their feet.
Yeah, this is just a level of cruelty that's awful. Once he arrived, he pulled out Shannon's body, dumping it onto the ground. Chris then grabbed Cece's blanket, one of the only true, like, items of comfort. That's just, like, such a thing, like, kids and their blankies, you know? Like, you think of, like, Linus from frickin'...
Yeah.
the peanuts. It's just such like a thing that they have. He took her blanket, placed it over her head, and strangled her to death. And he did it while Bella watched silently, feet away. Bella then watched her dad carry her dead sister's body up a ladder on top of one of the oil tanks, where he opened an 8-inch hatch and dropped her body into the oil. He talks about hearing the splash and how far away it was. And he talks about it with such indifference, it makes you want to put a bullet in his head. Chris returned for Bella, and as he approached her, she said her final words. Daddy, is the same thing going to happen to me that happened to Cece? Chris puts the blanket over Bella's head. Daddy, no. She fought as hard as she could, but ultimately she was carried up to the other oil tank, and Bella was bigger than Cece because she was older, so making her fit through the 8-inch hole would prove challenging. But Chris was ultimately able to brute force her into the tank, but the damage to her body would be evident later on. Thank God those girls were dead before he dumped them. That's like one of the only saving graces with this whole shit show is that they were at least, it was at least relatively
just forcing
quick.
His little baby daughter's body in an oil tank, like just pushing her in like she's trash. Terrible.
Chris then dug a shallow grave for Shannon, and he kicked her in face down. And it was at this point that Chris noticed that Shannon had had a coffin birth. She had evacuated the fetus, and baby Nico lay dead in the dirt with his mother. Chris covered the grave up with some weeds, feeling nothing but relief, and he then just started another day at the office. By that afternoon, Chris had contacted his realtor to discuss selling their house, and he'd also contacted Bella and Cece's school, informing them that they would not be in attendance for the foreseeable future. These are all actions that would come back to bite him in the ass. So 1:48 p.m. Shannon's friend, Nicole Atkinson, reports her missing, but she can't get a hold of her. And this woman, she's one of the heroes of this story. Nicole Atkinson is a damn good friend.
We would all be so lucky to have a friend like her. I think my best friend, Lauren, would be like her.
I mean, does Lauren know your doctor schedules, your medications, and all that stuff?
Yes.
And if so, yes.
And not because she asks, but because I keep her informed.
You force it upon her.
In case.
You see, she knew that something was wrong when she couldn't get in touch with Shannon. And she really freaked out when she went to Shannon's house and saw that her car was still home. She knew that Shannon was in trouble. She just had this gut feeling, and she wasn't taking shit from anyone. So Atkinson calls in a well check with 911. Now, for those who don't know what a well check is,
there's a well in your house.
Yes.
And the police go
typically
and they check.
The dog will come and bark, and I'll understand that somebody fell into the well. It's usually little Timmy. That fucker likes to play around the well. We tell him no, but here we are again, checking the well for little Timmy. That's not what it is. No. See, a well check it's not a missing person. Honestly, it typically applies to elderly people is usually what we get well checks for, or people that are known to be mentally ill and maybe have a history of non-compliance with their medication. It's when you are concerned about the safety of someone and you want the police to just verify that they're okay. And in these circumstances, that is a very rational, smart thing to do. It hadn't been that long. She couldn't get in touch with her, but she had enough reason to know that something was wrong and that she needed somebody to verify that she was okay. And I will say, as a cop, there's nothing worse than doing a well check for grandma and you get to the house and there's fucking 3 weeks worth of mail in there, because you know when you get in that house what you're going to be smelling and what you're going to be seeing, and it's never good. Only once has it actually happened that wasn't the case for me. I don't know if I told you about this one, but it was a well check.
She looked at it and then she took a deep breath.
Well,
Grandma missed dinner.
Spent 45 minutes trying to get into this fucking house. They were like, oh, we saw her 2 days ago. She's a hoarder. She lives alone. She's in her late 60s, which is young, but bad health problems. Eventually, we end up just gaining access to the house, breaking a window. I make my way upstairs through all the trash, and this woman is lying there, motionless, And I'm about to go to my supervisor. Oh, God damn it. She's gone. We're going to need an ambulance. And then she says, hello. And I think my exact reaction in front of my supervisor was, holy fucking shit, she's alive. We need a fucking ambulance right now. She had just slipped and fell in a pile of trash and had been there for like, I think 12 hours. I don't know. She was alive though, and that's a happy ending that typically doesn't happen. So Atkinson calls in a well check. The first officer on scene does his best to calm her down with some rational excuses for her inability to get in touch with Shanann. But Atkinson is Johnny on the spot with valid reasons to be concerned. One of her biggest is that Shanann had a doctor's appointment and she didn't make it. She knew she had that appointment.
And it was a sonogram appointment, I think,
yeah, and
right?
Shanann is having a high-risk pregnancy for, having lupus and all the other health issues that she had. So for her to just not show up, that's not normal. And Nicole Atkinson knows that that's not normal. The whole time this is going on, she's texting Chris, and he is being suspicious as fuck. Don't call the police, he demanded of her. Thank God she didn't listen. Now, at this point, Chris was pushing the narrative that Shanann had taken the kids to a friend's house. Now, that might have worked on the police and strangers. It certainly worked on the parents, but it sure shit doesn't work on her actual friends. He didn't think that one through. And the fact that he didn't think that through is beyond me. And you see this happen with a lot of his choices. He has very poor risk management skills.
Yeah, he didn't think most of this through. And I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into later as to why that is.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of people that commit murder have the same thought. I'm not going to get caught.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to rhyme. I didn't mean to Dr. Seuss this story.
I couldn't think of a way to bring up green eggs and ham, so we're going to move on to the guy who killed his family now. Chris arrives, and he sprints over to the police. He opens the house so that they can search for Shanann and the kids, and as they go through the house, they find her wedding rings.
Well, I want to just go back to the fact that how long did it take for him to get to the house, number one, from the time they alerted him?
Really, he didn't come until the police were, called.
He took his time to get there.
Yeah.
And not only that, but he is just, if you've seen the Netflix documentary,
highly recommend
is it called
that you
American
do.
Murder?
It's called American Murder, Family Next Door.
Yeah.
That's actually one of our sources, and I'll record me crediting the sources.
Yeah. I mean, you could just see when he pulls up, there's no sense of urgency, he's not.
No, I think that's why he sprinted over to the
worried.
cop, because he's like, how do I make this look good? How do I make it look like I'm concerned? I'll run
After I've taken 45, was it 45 minutes or was it 5 hours?
It's a 45-minute drive, but the point is, there's no way that Atkinson wasn't reaching out to him before 1:40 to tell him, I can't get in touch with her. I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So they find the wedding rings. Now, Chris knew eventually he would have to move on to the narrative that they left me. So that's why he took them and he put them on the nightstand. Nice little sign of, fuck you, it's over. Now, the thing that really disturbed Nicole was they found Shanann's cell phone. Shanann lived her whole damn life out there on social media. The odds of her leaving without her phone were just infinitesimal, and she knew that. Chris pointed out that the kids' blankies were gone. Quote, they don't leave anywhere without them. So between the ring and the blankies, Chris is building this narrative. Shanann left him and she took the kids. Now Atkinson, the ever-astute friend, continues to punch holes in this fallacy. She finds Shanann's bag and it's full of her medication. So we have some pretty obvious signs of foul play between the cell phone and her not having her meds. I don't know what somebody with lupus takes, but I'm pretty sure they are on a fairly regimented set of meds that they kind of have to take. So Chris just continues to tell his versions of events to the responding officer. He says that he left for work at about 5:15 in the morning, and when he left, she was still there with the kids. Another complication arises for Chris, however, when his neighbor has a camera that sees Chris's driveway. This is definitely a fact that he didn't know. So Chris, Officer Coonrod, and his neighbor, Nathaniel Trinistich, are watching the security recording together. Now, this is the first time where the cracks really start to show. Mm-hmm. This is also the most emotion that you will see him give throughout the entirety of this investigation. The fear is all over Chris during these moments. Go back and watch the portion of the body cam. He turns away at points. He's grabbing his head. He's fidgeting. He's thinking, I'm fucked. They caught me. Easily, the most challenging part of watching this, though, is when Nate turns the security video off, switching it back to the regular TV, and it goes to National Geographic. An animation of a human fetus appears on screen. Chris stares at it, and then he blurts out, she's pregnant as well. Shortly after that bomb, he leaves to go talk to the detective who arrived on scene. Officer Coonrod stays back to get Nate's pedigree, only for Nate to drop his own bomb. Quote, he's not acting right at all, end quote. Being somebody who knew what Chris's baseline was, Nate picked up on the drastic change in his demeanor. Nate expressed these observations to the officer and then pointed out on the security footage that Chris has never backed his truck up into his garage to load up for work. Ever. The following day, Chris agrees to be interviewed by Denver's ABC affiliate to plead for his family's safe return. Now, we've all seen this before. You can conjure up the image in your mind, the tears, the tissues, the individuals desperately trying to keep it together as they humanize their missing family in hopes to reach out to whomever took them. The decision to do this interview was, in my mind, the moment that Chris blew it on a national level. He not only lost all sympathy, but garnered the suspicion of anyone with half a brain. And I mean, just watch the shit. Chris came off completely emotionless and indifferent. He seemed bored.
Yeah, he seemed like, please get me off of this news network. This is torture.
But here's the thing. He chose to do it.
Yeah. Well, he chose to do it because that's what people who don't murder their spouses do. They go on TV, they plead for their loved ones to be returned, for them to be found. And so I think he did this, obviously to take the attention off of him. Like, look, I'm the pleading husband that just wants his wife and kids back. But, he wasn't the pleading husband, and he could not play that role at all.
His mask wasn't that developed.
His mask wasn't what?
Wasn't that developed.
Yeah.
So at this point, the FBI is getting involved. We're 48 hours in. Now, we have investigator Tammy Lee and Graham Coder. They are the ones basically like the point men on Chris. And there's a lot of interview video that you can watch with Coder and Chris.
Yeah.
And he does a great job, hitting all the beats he needs to hit, stroking his ego when he needs to stroke it, trying to build that rapport, trying to find out, trying to dig without seeming too accusatory. Just he makes it seem as though, listen, like, I'm just doing my job. And I wouldn't be doing my job and be doing right by your family if I didn't look into you too, right? One of the things that I love about this case is everyone's firing on all cylinders. Everyone is doing what they need to do. Civilians are looking out for their neighbors and their friends, and the law enforcement officials did a damn fine job. So it is decided that Chris will be taking a polygraph test on the next day. Now, polygraph tests, as somebody who's actually been polygraphed, they're interesting. They're not admissible as a court evidence, but they are a tool, and they're not really used to tell if someone's lying per se. They're a tool to measure a response, and it's all about getting somebody's baseline by answering questions that they're telling the truth, and they're telling the truth. What's your name? How old are you? What day is it? And it's then about finding the differentials, like the differentials in that person's baseline, and then you can extrapolate, like, okay, like something was off with this. What about this question triggered you? And that's how you can tell someone's lying. Now, investigator Tammy Lee says, like, listen, like, it would be really fucking stupid to take this polygraph if you had something to do with this. And he's like, nope. And she's like, Perfect. Then we'll clear your name and boom, we'll move on to the next one. No big deal. August 15th, 2018, Chris goes in and he takes the polygraph. And some time passes and a much colder Tammy Lee and Coder enter the room. Now, she had been doing a great job being on his side, being bubbly, and really just giving him the positive reinforcement that he was cooperating in the case. But at this point, they got him. It's obvious that he was not being truthful.
Yeah,
and
they didn't need this polygraph test to know that, but
they needed something concrete to show him.
Of course.
Yeah. So they address like, listen, like, we know you're lying. We know that you know where they are. And he keeps saying, I just want them to come home. And Tam says, but you know they're not.
I just want those girls. Those girls are my life. Just the most cliche, detached sayings. I swear, he must have read like a bunch of like aim away stories. Remember those?
Wow, throwback to 2004, y'all.
Love you to the moon and back. Love you, my boo. My girls are my life. Lyfe. No, he didn't say that. But I mean, it's so cringeworthy, just like hearing the detachment.
It is.
That he had.
And they're just not having any of it. There's this great moment where Coda's like, listen, just stop, deep breath in, deep breath out. Aren't you tired? Like, just you want to tell us what happened. You came here knowing what the outcome of this would be. And it's like, let's just do what we need to do. Like, just help us find them at this point. They know that they're dead. They know that there's no reality, that they're still alive.
Yeah.
And this is where a very intense tactic is employed by Investigator Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bold fucking move. And it worked out for them. Tammy knows that there's no reality that Chris is just going to confess to murdering his wife and his kids. But could you maybe get him to confess to a more palatable version of that? i.e., did maybe Shannon do something to your kids? And then you felt like you had to do something to her, making it something that people could almost understand. Now, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are like, well, why would they do that? Why would they purposely elicit a false confession? Do you have any theories as to why they would do it?
I mean, I think, like you said, they knew that he wasn't going to just straight up say, yep, I murdered my wife and kids for no good reason. I mean, there isn't a good reason, but for someone like Chris, who I think, no one had a bad thing to say about him.
And that was important to him.
Yeah, that was very important to him. And I think, once again, she's kind of helping him to
weave a narrative where he's not 100% the bad guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, rationalize or, like, kind of say, like, hey, like, if your wife hurt your kids and, like, you had to do what you had to do, that's something else. Tell us.
Yeah. So their end game is not about getting the confession. That's shit. They don't care. And even if they got that confession, that's not what they're after. They want him to pay for what he did. Their hope in eliciting this confession is they want to get the bodies. Because when you get the bodies, you get forensics. And when you get forensics, you can poke holes in a false confession. You do this so you can find a body, and you hope that when you do, there is enough forensic evidence to prove that what they said was bullshit and to prove what actually happened. It's a serious roll of the die, and ultimately we know it ends up working.
Well, I think they could also tell, like, Chris did not do a great job at planning this.
No, and
he wasn't.
It was planned. We'll get more into that.
Yeah, he wasn't, being a mastermind. I don't think he was being manipulative at any point. I think he truly, like, thought in his head, like, you know what, I'm a good guy. Like, people think I'm a good guy. Like, I have that going for me. I'll just stage it like they, left and ran away, and that's it.
But so many things fucked that up. I mean, one of the biggest things that we didn't touch on is they point out for the polygraph, like, listen, like, you said that you left and they were still there. We have video of no one leaving. That means that if someone left, they left in your car with you, which, by the way, was a good 45 minutes before you said it was.
Yeah.
So Chris's dad is there. They allow the dad to come in, and that's when he latches on to this kernel that they gave him, and he starts pushing the narrative of Shanann killed the kids, so I killed Shanann, and then I dumped her body. And you'll notice that he stresses the only way this can work is if the time of death of the kids is before Shanann. Luckily, we have enough forensic science out there that we can get time of deaths pretty good, and there was a good hour and a half difference in their time of death.
Who's doing the autopsy?
What are their credentials?
Is it Pfizer? It's all about the money.
Yeah,
Where's the money going?
Follow the money.
Time's irrelevant. Time's up.
So they find the bodies. Chris tells them where they are. And there are so many victims in something like this that we don't think of. It goes beyond just the dead and their family. Someone like Nicole Kessinger, you might not like her, but guess what? Like, she's a victim in this too. The first responders that had to pull the decaying bodies of children out of fucking oil drums, they're victims too. This just goes so much farther beyond.
The whole community, to even, the coroners performing the autopsies. I mean, obviously, like, that's your job. You do what you have to do, but I'm sure that there's a day in like a coroner's life where you're like, wow, I really hope I don't have to, determine the cause of death on like a murdered child, or, it's just, it's terrible. And, trauma, it comes in waves, and it doesn't just affect the people that, a situation or adverse event happens to. And that's something that, I think is really important when, just talking about any murder case. It's like it goes beyond just the people that it happened to in the community.
So it doesn't take long after that. The bodies are found on the 16th. On the 21st, Chris is charged with first-degree murder. Now, first-degree, premeditation. It's a hard thing to prove. We've seen it happen time and time again where something's been borderline and they pushed for first degree and the whole thing gets thrown out. Right, Casey Anthony? Right, other people in Florida?
Well, she's innocent because she is still advocating to find the killer of her daughter.
Oh, no. She was found innocent, so she definitely didn't do it. Right, O.J. Simpson? Oh. Right, George Zimmerman?
But if she did, here's how she'd do it.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a difference between being innocent and not being a piece of shit, so neither here nor there. Point being, where do we get the premeditation? Because with something like this, you could say it wouldn't be that hard for him to push the narrative of like, oh, it was a spur of the moment, temporary insanity.
No.
Well, exactly. You see, he was sloppy. He did lots of stupid shit that left a trail. One of the biggest things that he did was he texted the day before the murders his coworker Cody, and he said, hey, don't bother going to survey 319. I'll take care of it on my own. I'm going to go straight there in the morning. This would ensure that Chris would be able to dump the bodies without any interference. And right there, that's a sign of premeditation.
But I also mean, like, not for nothing, he killed his kids twice. He smothered them first. They woke up. He had the opportunity to not
many
do that
people
again.
get a mulligan when it comes to killing their kids.
Yeah, like a do-over. Like, oh my God, I lost control. Like, I'm so sorry. He did it.
He doubled down.
Again.
And that is the single aspect of this case that I find most disturbing. To be able to kill your kids twice is just the most chilling thing.
And I think that he also, like, it just shows, like, how much he wanted to hurt Shanann. Like, the fact that he thought to kill the girls first makes me think that somehow he wanted her to know, like, they're dead.
Yeah.
To see, the fact that he slept with her before he killed her, knowing that all she has wanted was to work on their marital issues and be close with him, and just to, like, give her the one final, like, fuck you.
Here's a quote from him. August 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and I said, that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before, and I did nothing to stop it. That's a level of disassociation here that just like irks me. Like, notice how he says, like, I did nothing to stop it, as if it were an act of neglect or caused by inaction. It's like murdering your children is an active choice that you make. Mm-hmm. It was a choice and an action that he made 5 times over the morning of the 13th. November 6th is the next major break in this case. Chris Watts pleads guilty to all 9 counts. Several counts of murder, tampering with a body, unlawful termination of a pregnancy. Now, why would he plead guilty, you might be asking? Well, they happen to live in a death penalty state. And it was part of the agreement. Plead guilty, we'll take death off the counter. You don't have to worry about that. You'll spend the rest of your life in jail. And he knew he was fucked. He knew there was no way. This is also when his piece of shit mom decides to chime in and say, I just don't understand why he's pleading guilty. He should just keep fighting because he didn't do it. He's saying he did it, and she's still...
The FBI literally gave him the story and for him to go off of, and I mean, the forensic evidence proved otherwise. But then again, I mean, you know, we've seen this in other cases. You know, if you've... Well, I don't know if I should even mention the Don't Fuck with Cats documentary on Netflix. But essentially, it's just, you know, another murder case where it's like, okay, this person is clearly guilty, but their mom is like, no, it's this person, or no, it's, you know, I believe what my child said. And it's sometimes the love of a parent can be
blinding.
Incredibly blinding.
Yeah. So November 19th, his sentencing. Obviously, he's sentenced to life in prison. He's never getting out, ever.
Really, I think he'd make a great contribution to society.
Right? Yeah.
I think he should be. Well, here's the thing, I don't think Chris Watts would reoffend again. I don't. He's not that type of offender. But I certainly don't believe that he should be given the opportunity to re-enter society when he made the decision for 3.5 people that was no longer going to be an option for them.
So you're saying is it Shannon's fault?
I think she killed the kids, yeah, is what I'm saying.
Or is it Nicole Kessinger's fault?
You know what?
That was rhetorical. It is no one's fucking fault but Chris Watts. And like, let's be real for a second. Maybe you thought Shannon was fucking annoying. And you know what? I'm kind of in that camp. She's a little annoying. But guess what? Does that make it okay to kill her? No, it fucking doesn't. And maybe you look at Nicole Kessinger and you say, you know what? She's a bitch. She knew that he was married. And you know what? For argument's sake, we'll say, sure, maybe she knew. Maybe she knew he had no intention of leaving his wife and she was content with being the other woman. Maybe that makes you a bad person. But you know what? Like, once again, why are we putting the blame on these women? Why are we putting the blame on these people who are victims? Like, at the end of the day, Chris Watts did what he did. Doesn't matter how crappy his parents were. It doesn't matter how annoying his wife might have been. Doesn't matter if he was seeing some other girl on the side. He made the choices that he made.
Yeah.
And the sexism around this case is just staggering. The amount of people that want to blame Shannon and blame Nicole Kessinger for what happened.
That's how the human mind works. You know, as human beings, when something horrible or something unpredictable happens, we try to make sense of it, right? And sometimes that means looking for someone or something to blame. And I mean, we see it all the time, right? Like in mass shootings, you have people that are like, oh, it's this person's mental illness, or, oh, it's guns. And I'm not saying either one is right or not right. I mean, I have my personal beliefs, but I won't share them on here. We see it all the time, like, being in a pandemic, right? Everyone wants to know, well, what caused this? What caused this?
As if it changes the circumstances.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Okay, so we know what caused it. Yeah, sure. Maybe it might help in the future to understand, oh, hey, X can lead to Y, which can lead to Z, but ultimately it doesn't change anything.
When your fucking house is burning down, you're not going to sit down and have a 30-minute debate with the people in the house how the fire started before you put it out.
Right, right. And I think with this case, people are like, wow, he was such a good guy. He was such a good father and nice man. Someone made him snap. Something had to build up. And yes, he caused things to build up for himself. And he created, the inner chaos and inner turmoil he was experiencing. Shanann had a very different personality than Chris. That's obvious.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, that's not an excuse or reason for him to kill her. And yeah, I remember after watching the documentary and going online and seeing just some of the way people were talking about it, like, oh, she was annoying. I would kill my wife. Like, really?
And also, and let me know if this is a thing, because it's just something I noticed. There seems to be a disproportionate amount of people of one particular gender criticizing the women in this.
Yes, cis women. And
why is that?
Because a lot of women grow up with the complex of, I have to fix people. I have to fix my spouse, or, I could have saved him if I was married to Chris Watts and this was my family. Things would have turned out differently. I think that's part of it. And I also think the other part of it too is Chris Watts is an attractive young guy. And I think that
he's probably single.
Well, you'd be surprised. I think that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around, how could this, really handsome young man do such a disgusting and ugly crime? It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And something really terrible must have happened to him for this to have occurred. And he's deserving of a second chance. And, he deserves to have pen pals in prison and whatnot. If Chris Watts was 350 pounds short, just an unattractive male and quote unquote,
William H. Macy looking motherfucker.
Yeah. William H. Macy.
Pogo the Clown. That serial killer?
Yeah. He doesn't look the part is what I'm trying to get at. And
we're aware that that's actually John Wayne Gacy. It's just an inside joke that we have.
Yeah. And, a lot of times people will base looks on, I think, capability. And I think that it's well, this beautiful young man couldn't have done this without a good reason, or, someone, he was asking for help and no one reached out. It's no, he wasn't. And he was offered help and he didn't go.
A lot of the post-mortem on this is fascinating. When it comes to just how people react to him now. Another interesting thing too is he's ordered to pay the family of Shanann $6 million. And it's one of those things that's he's not going to be able to pay that. So I know people ask, well, why do that? If he he works he's in a jail, what is he going to fucking do? It's more a function of it prevents him from being able to profit off of this in any way. For when, they do the movie adaptation starring Dean Cain, he won't be able to get a cent. Anything that he would get goes.
Dean Cain would make a great Chris Watts.
Oh, that was a joke. I'm pretty sure he played Scott Peterson in the movie version of
I haven't seen that.
Dean Cain is entirely too old to play Chris Watts.
You're right. Actually, I think you and I both agree that Eddie Redmayne would make the best
Shanann.
Chris Watts. No. I think Whoopi Goldberg should play Shanann.
I don't even know what we're referencing anymore.
Well,
fuck it. Scarlett Johansson's going to play all of them.
Wasn't there a rumor that Julia Roberts was supposed to play Harriet Tubman?
No, not a rumor. It was a leaked email, I believe. It was, or a leaked conversation between executives. they were like, we should just have Julia Roberts play her because she's a name. And somebody pointed out that Harriet Tubman was, in fact, yes, black woman. And Julia Roberts is not. And they were like, well, that was a long time ago. They probably won't remember. You know, some of that girl white savior complex that we love so much in Hollywood.
Tell me you have no idea who Harriet Tubman is without actually telling.
She's on the fucking $20 bill. Oh, that still hasn't happened? Oh.
Yeah, no, it's Andrew Jackson.
Oh.
Fearless leader.
Well, one day somebody listening to this podcast will be like, yeah, she is. Wait, why are they acting like she isn't? I don't know. But that's pretty much where it ends. He did get moved prisons because there were fears for his safety. Weird. Child murderers tend to not fare well on the inside. And that's just it. Like, here we are. We have this weird case where there's just so much stuff you can watch.
He's in Wisconsin if anyone wants to write to him.
Please don't write to him.
Don't write to him.
Don't give him the energy. He thinks he's famous now.
Yeah.
He's back to that whole loving the attention and people loving him. It's so weird. So here's my question. What is his deal? Is he a sociopath? Is he a narcissist? Is he just fucking crazy? Like give me that big sexy brain of yours and let me know what the deal with Chris Watts is based on the limited stuff that you have.
He's not crazy. That's a very loose term, but no, he is not insane, nor was he insane when he committed these crimes. The book that we used as one of the sources, Call Me Daddy.
That is 100% not the name of the book.
What was it called? It's Letters to My Daddy.
My Daddy is a Hero.
Yes. I was thinking to myself, you know what? This title doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I need my meds.
That is staying in.
What is it? My Daddy's My Hero?
My Daddy is a Hero.
So once again, I'm just going to bring up the fact that, I am not clinically diagnosing Chris Watts with anything because, once again, I have not
It's all speculation.
worked with him. It's all speculation and for, educational purposes to kind of get into some mental health diagnoses. But one of the sources for this episode was a book called My Daddy is a Hero by Lena Derhaley, who is I believe she's a licensed psychologist. I think I agreed with her assessment, we'll call it, right off the bat that Chris Watts is a narcissist.
Now, you've discussed narcissism with me before, often while I stare in a mirror. But you've said that narcissism isn't as binary as people think, that I don't want to say spectrum, but there are different kinds of narcissism, correct?
There are different kinds.
Could you quickly just give like a real quick summation of what like the top 3 are?
Sure. Yeah, because every time I kind of look into narcissism, it kind of seems like it's the same patterns, but like the names have changed. So first I'll go into what it means to have narcissistic personality disorder. I actually have a copy of the DSM-5 right in front of me. I've had it out the whole time.
Oh, what if the audience didn't read DSMs 1 through 4? They'll be lost, Megan.
Well, those actually are no longer in use because they've been updated. Like, homosexuality was a mental health diagnosis in the DSM-2. So I will just get into the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder that's stated in the DSM. And for those of you who are like, what are you even talking about? What is the DSM? It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is what mental health professionals use to diagnose mental disorders present in individuals. So according to the DSM, narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, need for admiration, lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. 1. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance. For example, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior. 2. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. 3. Believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high-status people or institutions. 4. Requires excessive admiration. 5. Has a sense of entitlement. For example, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. 6. Is interpersonally exploitative. For example, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. 7. Lacks empathy. Is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. 8. Is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her. 9. Shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. So, once again, it's meeting at least 5 of those criteria.
And that's just for baseline narcissism?
And that is just for baseline narcissistic personality disorder. But once again, human beings are very complex, and we don't always fit into these tiny boxes where it's like, yep, check, check, check. I'm sure there's some criteria there that is like, oh yeah, that sounds like Chris Watts. And then others that are like, maybe so much.
Because the funny thing is, like, when you say like, oh, Chris Watts is a narcissist, people look at him and they're like, well, that almost seems antithetical to who he was. He was so quiet and tepid, and he let Shannon run the show. Like, that seems to be counter what most people consider a classical narcissist.
Yeah. And prior to reading that book, I was definitely on the page that he is a covert narcissist. So I'll get into, the types of narcissism. The first type, and none of these are listed in the DSM-5 as actual like mental health diagnoses. They're more just they're like subtypes, no one
variants, if you will.
Yeah, they're like variants of narcissistic personality, but no one is, essentially diagnosed with, oh, you're a malignant narcissist. That's going in like your medical paperwork. So one of the types of narcissism is grandiose narcissism, which is the type of narcissism that everyone thinks of when, you hear the term narcissist. Just has this inflated sense of self.
Your Gastons for the Disney folk out there.
Yes, exactly. Gaston is a grandiose narcissist. I'm beautiful. Everybody loves me. I'm to be admired by everyone. And that's just really the baseline of that type of narcissism. Now, what I'm going to talk about a little bit are certain subtypes of narcissism. Although not listed in the DSM, there have been a lot of theoretical and empirical work conducted that suggests subtypes exist within this diagnosis. There isn't a general consensus on how many subtypes there are. However, most experts agree that there are at least 2: overt grandiose and covert vulnerable. And the third one, Benedict Cumberbatch narcissism.
Not Benadryl coming, bitch.
I don't know why I just thought of his name. I don't think he's a narcissist.
But can we admit Benedict Cumberbatch looks a little bit like a hammerhead shark?
He does.
Just a little bit.
But I love hammerheads.
Oh, no, it wasn't a condemnation of the man. I love his work and his overall hammerhead sharkiness.
But you know what? Now that you mentioned sharks, Paul, I like to take some time out in this podcast just to talk about
ocean conservationism.
Fine, I'll
God,
say it.
You get this bitch one paddleboard, and all of a sudden she's like some kind of marine biologist or something.
Listen, leave me and my shark fascination alone.
Okay.
Overt grandiose. This is what most people think of when they hear the term narcissist. Overt grandiose narcissists believe that they are better and smarter than most people and are not afraid to show it. They can be bold, arrogant, and exploitative of others to get their way.
Elon Musk. Whoa.
Oh
Sorry.
my God.
I
We
just
have
sneezed.
a Tesla, so we can't even. Well, I guess we don't have to like him. He's
Listen, he's probably a Bond villain, but the guy makes a good car.
It is a very nice car. Electric is the future, guys. Overt, grandiose narcissists put their self-centeredness on display, and should they feel they are anything but the center of attention, that's when the gaslighting starts.
Which, I mean, Megan, I don't know how many times we have to talk about this. Gaslighting doesn't exist. You made it up because you're fucking crazy.
No, gaslighting is when, like, you're in Target and you run past someone really quick and you fart and you just leave, like, a trail of destruction in their path.
Okay, that's crop dusting.
Oh, you're
also,
right.
I'm going to have to credit Rick and Morty. I literally stole that gaslighting joke from them.
Okay. So, once again, gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse where an individual or group makes you question your perception of reality. This is seen in a lot of narcissistic abusive relationships where, you know, kind of like the joke Paul was making before. That's not what happened. You're being too sensitive. They make you doubt what you believe to be true, or I shouldn't even say what you believe to be true, what you know is true, as a way to manipulate and gain control over you. The next form of narcissism, the covert vulnerable form.
This is what you're theorizing
This
our
is
boy
what,
has.
before I learned about the other subtypes, this is what I thought Chris Watts was. So the covert vulnerable narcissist is the victim. They perceive themselves to be superior and smarter than most people. However, the world fails to recognize this. They can have a reserved and self-effacing attitude. They may appear as someone who has been dealt a bad hand or may need a confidence boost, but their arrogance shows this is not the case. They lack accountability for their acts. Nothing is ever their fault. They may say something like, I was fired because I was smarter and better than my boss, and the whole team felt intimidated by my genius. You know, your friend, right? Everyone has that one friend that I feel like may be a covert narcissist, the one that just can't keep a job, and it's always the job's fault and, like, never them. I'm too talented to work at Staples, and Staples knew it, so they let me go. Like, okay, guy, I'm pretty sure you were just in charge of stocking pens, but whatever. Now, the next subtypes of narcissism are ones that I was not familiar with. So they're very interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and explain what they are. Communal narcissism. These narcissists seek to validate their grandiosity through charitable acts and commitment to others. They might discuss how helpful and empathetic they are towards other people. They see themselves as superior, but want to be perceived as selfless. So an example of this type of narcissist, I would say, are, if you guys ever see those cringeworthy videos of influencers giving homeless people money, and then they post it online for everyone to see, like, look, I went up to this homeless man and gave him $100 to get food. Or I took this homeless man back to my house for a shower. Look how charitable and kind I am. I'm not saying that all influencers that do that are narcissists. I'm just saying that that is definitely what a communal narcissist would do and get off on. The next type of narcissism is the malignant narcissist. Now, these narcissists will do whatever they need to get their way. They will tear others down and destroy lives as a means to boost their ego. They aren't necessarily grandiose or attention-seeking like other types of narcissists, but they are the least empathetic and remorseful, linking them closely to psychopathy. Which brings me to my next point, and a point that is discussed in the book that we read that I am once again forgetting the title of.
Call Me By Your Name.
My Daddy is My Hero.
My daddy is a hero.
For fuck's sake. Okay. My Daddy is a Hero. So I actually had a really hard time finding a definitive definition for psychopathy, so I'm going to try my best to provide one based on my experience and my research. Psychopathy is a psychological construct characterized in part by shallow emotional responses, lack of empathy, impulsivity, and an increased likelihood for antisocial behavior. Psychopathy is often used interchangeably with the term sociopathy, and although the two disorders share many of the same characteristics, they are not the same. Sociopathy refers to a pattern of antisocial behaviors and attitudes, including manipulation, deceit, aggression, and a lack of empathy for others. Sociopathy is a non-diagnostic term. While we're at it, I should also mention that psychopathy is also a non-diagnostic term. They are not seen in the DSM-5 at all. When we're talking about psychopathy and sociopathy, what clinicians seem to be referring to is another personality disorder called antisocial personality disorder, which is essentially a disorder that kind of encompasses both the definitions of psychopathy and sociopathy. You know, there's lack of remorse, aggression, there's a history of...
motorcycle passing.
Yes, a motorcycle passing.
There's also an innate need to collect 5 gems of power, stones, if you will, and wipe out half of all life.
Cut off your wife when she's talking.
Okay,
Cutting off your ADHD wife mid-thought and then expecting her to pick up that thought where she left off.
I was trying to segue into the fact that there was a whole kerfluffle. I don't know if you remember when this happened, when Infinity War came out to streaming services, that in the description they wrote that Thanos was a galactic sociopath.
Yeah, I'd say Thanos is a good example of a sociopath. Why were people offended by that term?
No. I think that people weren't sure if that was accurate. There was argument as to whether he was a sociopath or a psychopath.
Sociopaths, they do have relationships that they care about.
Gamora.
Yes. Dexter Morgan. Psychopaths do not.
You heard it here, guys. You heard it here first. We got Dexter Morgan and Thanos, both confirmed sociopaths, not psychopaths. You heard it here first.
And so that's like another like main difference between the two. And then I also read something online that I can't remember the source. I'll find it and I'll put it in the sources link at the end of the episode. But someone describes, you know, psychopaths are born and sociopaths are made. So, you know, sociopaths are very much the product of their environment. And psychopaths are just kind of born that way. They're, you know.
Born bad.
Born bad, yeah.
That's a really interesting way to put that. I like that delineation because I feel like it gets very muddled for a lot of people. So to kind of break it down in that way is good, interesting.
So in layman's terms, getting back to it, antisocial personality disorder is a mental health disorder characterized by disregard for other people. And that's about as far as I'll go into that diagnosis right now.
All right, so now I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the nuances between the different kinds of narcissism and how sociopathy is really, or I'm sorry, psychopathy rather is almost more of a checklist.
Yeah,
like you can have tendencies, right?
It's more of a trait of a disorder than an actual.
And you can have comorbidity
diagnosis.
between those things, right?
Between what? Psychopathy and narcissism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, could you just explain what comorbidity is to?
Comorbidity is, you know, in the mental health sense, is the presence of 2 or more mental health diagnoses. But once again, you know, psychopathy is generally a trait and not a diagnosis. So to say that, you know, psychopathy is comorbid with narcissism, I don't really think that that's correct. But, you know, I did agree with a lot of what Lena DeHurley said in her book about him being a communal narcissist. You know, that's actually one of the types of narcissism that I wasn't familiar with prior to reading this. So once I did kind of learn about it, it really did kind of open my eyes. And I was like, wow, yeah, it really does seem like he kind of fits this definition, that his thing is praised by others and, you know, doing acts of service and Having a good guy facade.
Yeah, like to put it bluntly, he gets off on people fucking loving him.
Yeah, being the one that, like, you know, I don't even want to say that everyone can turn to, but just because, like, I don't think he was like putting it out there like, I will help you. But there's one part in the book where he gets upset because someone says he isn't helpful.
Well, yeah, his concern is always his perception. He's very focused on his perception of being a good guy, which when you put it in that frame, like, it does start to sound like narcissism, even if he seems small or like a martyr in that way.
Yeah, and like, as we learned, it's not always overt, where it's like, love me, I'm so helpful, I'm so kind, I'm doing this for everyone. You know, he certainly wasn't saying, look at me, look at me. I think he just kind of wanted to have that reputation as like the nice guy, the peacekeeper.
So what factors of psychopathy were present with him?
I mean, first and foremost, lack of empathy and remorse for this. Obviously, you know, when I say lack of empathy, you know, obviously for his wife and for his children, but also just he is someone that struggled identifying emotions and appropriate responses for them. You know, like the fact that he was like Googling, you know, how do you know when you love someone?
Yeah, as a 30-something adult with 2 children.
Yeah, you know, like that's very bizarre. And just like, you know, Googling like love songs that he could like give to Nicole. It just shows you like he's someone that is not empathetic.
It's very childish.
I wouldn't even say childish. I would just say it's very cold and callous, because he's not emotionally stunted or immature like a child might be. It's just not present. Like, it's just not present in him at all.
So here's one of my questions for you as a layman in this area. I always understood one of the traits of psychopathy to be like a lack of emotion, yet when you go back and you watch some of the body cam video, specifically of them reviewing the surveillance tapes where he thinks he's going to get caught, he's afraid. Like he is experiencing fear, and we're watching him experience fear. So how could he have such a visceral emotional response to that and still be a psychopath?
Well, I think it's important to realize that psychopaths are about self-preservation, right? They're all about themselves. Their lack of emotion is when it comes to other people, right? So it's not like, you know, it just hit him that he killed his wife and kids, and, you know, he's upset about it, and now he's reeling from this crime that he's committed and whatnot. His fear was the fact that, you know, shit, I'm about to get caught. And now I'm not going to be able to
get what I want.
Yeah, get what I want, or live the life that I wanted. So when it comes to psychopathy, they can feel certain emotions in regards to themselves, but never for other people, although they do mask very well, some of them. And they do sometimes fool people into thinking that they do care or they are empathetic and whatnot, which just is not the case for them at all.
Interesting. So that's another thing ticked off on this checklist, so to speak, of psychopathy. Yeah. All right. So you know what? I'm going to ask you another question. There were points where Shannon was trying to coax Chris into marriage counseling, and his whole thing was, I don't need to talk to a fucking stranger to tell me what I already know about us. He was very obviously against it. Would counseling, be it marriage, couples, or even just one-on-one therapy, work for someone like Chris?
It's hard for any clinician to really know if therapy would have been effective for Chris and Shannon, but I'm going to go with my gut and based on what I know about narcissists, and I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say no because it is very hard to get narcissists to engage in therapy. And even if they do engage in therapy, it is most likely, the result of their partner wanting therapy. And what they're going to do in that situation is, gaslight, deflect on the partner and whatnot. They are not going to focus on themselves because in their mind, they don't do anything wrong. They don't accept responsibility for their actions. In Chris's mind, he did nothing wrong. He was out of love, and this was the only way he saw himself being able to live the life he wanted. I don't think him engaging in therapy would have changed the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be like an old man and go to this adage, but I feel like therapy is kind of like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's like you can point these things out to him, but if he's not receptive, like therapy, you can't force therapy on somebody. I feel like they need to be an active participant.
Yeah, and like there are so many levels to the human psyche, right? What brings you to therapy is just the surface. I could tell you that. So what would bring them? We're having marital issues. My husband's falling out of love with me, right? Like that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Especially with this particular case.
Yeah. There's so much more deep-seated issues on his part, and I just don't think therapy would have been helpful to them, especially couples therapy. Maybe if he sought individual therapy and he was open to the idea of working on himself and open to admitting some of his flaws or knowing that things weren't quite right with him, then perhaps there could have been some work. But I don't think most narcissists aren't going to have that level of insight.
So if he were to go to individual therapy, I mean, and once again, this is real Monday morning quarterbacky kind of shit. Do you think a therapist would have been able to pick up on his issues during a one-on-one session?
A therapist that solely works with narcissists, yeah, absolutely. I think over time, this subtype of narcissism is very tricky because, again, when we think narcissist, we think of the grandiose,
I'm the
overt
shit
type. Yeah, where we're like, okay, I'm so beautiful, this and that. Like, it's obvious. It's not obvious that he's a narcissist.
Yeah.
It's not.
Interesting.
And, is he a psychopath? Once again, I can't really diagnose him. And I kind of go back and forth because like we were talking about before, he met some of the criteria, but then there's other things where I'm just like, I don't know.
I mean, I know to some extent this is all just like we made it up because that's what humans do. Mm-hmm. We put things in boxes, we label things, but at the end of the day, like we make it up. But I almost wonder, like, I feel like we all have this perception that something like psychopathy is a binary yes or no. But the more we talk about it, the more I feel like it's more of a gradient where it's like Chris is not 100% a psychopath or not a psychopath, but he's definitely somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And I mean, that's with most mental health diagnoses, right? Everyone, I think, no, I shouldn't say everyone. I think that there are some people that like to have a diagnosis because it helps to make them make sense of what they're feeling, how some of their behaviors are, why they have some of the thoughts that they have. I think putting a label on things for some people can be helpful. But I also do agree it's not just black or white, right? There are so many mental health diagnoses that have the same symptomology as one another, and there's so much overlap that sometimes it really is hard to tell, like, well, is this person this, or do they have that? Is it possible that they have both? And that's just
the nature of the human brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what is more important is learning how to cope with these things, learning how to deal. Like someone like Chris, there is no, I mean, I should say, for most mental health diagnoses, right, there is no like magic pill you can take. It's about learning how your brain works, learning coping skills, learning how to change your thoughts and behaviors, learning how to regulate your nervous system. Like, there's all these factors involved.
All right. Gun to your head, you have to diagnose this guy. Where are you falling? And once again, can't stress this enough. This is for educational / entertainment purposes only. This is not an official diagnosis. What do you think?
Based upon, watching all the video clips and things that I learned about Chris during the investigation and from reading the book, I would say that he definitely has narcissistic personality disorder. If you were to ask me the subtype now, I would say he's probably more communal than covert, because I do feel that his grandiosity came from being the helpful guy that doesn't make waves. And I would say that he has psychopathic tendencies. I don't think I'd go off on the limb and say that he is a full-blown psychopath. I really don't believe that he is a full-blown psychopath. I didn't mention this earlier, but there are signs in childhood and adolescence that can show up later as psychopathy, and he displayed none of that. Yeah. So I would say he's a communal narcissist with psychopathic tendencies. Could be wrong, though.
Well, that's also presuming that he did it, which, once again, Cindy said, like, hey, the killer might still be out there.
Yeah. Maybe it was the demon that took over his body.
That's what he's saying now, right? That he was possessed
or
some
something
shit?
I think he, like, tried to use it at, like, some point. He was like, something came over me, to kind of distance himself. No demon took over Chris. Chris Watts is the only person responsible for this crime and the only reason that it happened. No demon, no Thrive patches. We know MLMs like that are full of shit, but the Thrive patch did not lead him to murder his family. I read that online last night. I think it was Oxygen.com had an article where he's like, the Thrive patches changed my brain chemistry.
No, they're just caffeine patches.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Those are do you have any final thoughts? Any from law enforcement perspective or
final thoughts. I hope that this is my final thought about Chris Watts, because all the research that we did leading up to this, reading the book, watching several documentaries, watching all of this interview
clips.
video,
I will stop you there, and I'll just recommend anyone who is very interested in this case to YouTube the interrogation with Graham Coder and Tammy Lee. Agents Graham Coder and Agents Tammy Lee, they did phenomenal work. Yeah. And I say, as someone who knows nothing about FBI interrogation,
they did a very, very good job. But I will forewarn you, you're going to be a little upset with them watching the interrogations, because they very much handle him with kid gloves. They're very nice to him, and that's going to put some people off. You have to understand it's a game. It's a game, and they have to play the game. And part of it is building a rapport. From the moment he walked in, they knew that there was something fucked up with him. They knew that he was involved, but it's all about strategy. So just understand that they don't actually like him. They don't actually appreciate him being helpful. It's a game, and it's all about getting that conviction and getting justice.
Yeah, they would have never gotten a confession or anything from him if they went in there hardball, we know you did it, tell us where they are.
No, he would have lawyered up.
Yeah. They needed to appeal to his narcissism, his communal narcissism, and pretend that they liked him and that he was being so helpful to the investigation. And that's why their interrogation technique worked.
Yeah. And what more of like a victim could you be than the parent of 2 little girls that your wife murdered? That's horrible. And then it also recontextualizes you killing your wife as an understandable act. Most parents would say, yeah, if my significant other killed my kids, that's the one thing that would drive most people to do that kind of a thing, in his eyes at least.
Yeah.
So that's how you get him to confess, and that's how you get the bodies, which get you the evidence that shows that he's full of shit. So from a law enforcement point of view, just once again, I can't stress how much of a relief it is to just see everyone doing their job and doing it well, the community coming together, the friends, the neighbors, like everyone really was just doing what they needed to do. The fact that we went from they're missing to he's under arrest in like what, 48, 72 hours, like it's good. Obviously, we wish that none of this happened, but it did happen. So all we can hope for is that people do their job and do that well, and that justice is ultimately served. And now he's gonna live the rest of his life in a fucking cell.
Yeah. Justice served as much as justice can be served in this case.
Yeah, justice would be him in a fucking vat of oil for no one to find. But I'm looking forward to never having to think about or talk about Chris Watts ever again, because living with him in my mind for this last 3 weeks has been not great.
Like talking about him nonstop and just
as a parent, as a spouse, as a cop, it's been not great. But we do it for you guys. We do it for entertainment and educational purposes.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I'm bringing the psychological aspect to this podcast as much as I can is to hopefully educate people on warning signs and encourage you, if you feel that you're in a relationship and something just isn't right, please go find help. Please, trust your gut. Go talk to a therapist. Go somewhere safe if you're in an unsafe situation. Once again, I'm not saying that Shannon didn't do any of these things. I'm not saying she believes she was in an unsafe situation.
No victim blaming here.
Yeah, I don't think... I know that she didn't see this coming.
No, absolutely not.
But if you're someone that is afraid of your partner or you have worries, please go somewhere safe. Speak with a therapist. Get out of that situation. I know it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. There are supports for you, and I'm gonna put some supports in the link.
Yeah, in the description, we're going to have not only links to all of the sources, but we're also going to have links to some resources for things like mental health, domestic violence. Just we want to make sure that you guys are informed. And just really quick, as my little aside, as a police officer who has done more domestics than I care to acknowledge, I'm just going to say this, and I say this to way too many people. They don't get better. They never get better. They only get worse. If they hit you today, they're not going to decide tomorrow, nah, not going to do that again. It only ever devolves. And what did you say earlier today, Megan? What is the most dangerous point of an abusive relationship? When are they most likely to get killed?
Oh, yeah, we were talking about this in the car. Women are most likely to be killed by their abusive partners after they leave the relationship, which is why so many stay in these relationships. So if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, once again, find a safe person to talk to, come up with a game plan to remove yourself from that situation.
Just know that you're not alone.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is our first episode, so give us some grace. And this was a real heavy case with surprisingly not a lot of psychological information to go off of.
Yeah, no, like Megan said, we appreciate you guys bearing with us as we figure out our groove and all of that. I know this is going to be a long one. We're probably going to top out at almost 2 hours, which is a long time to spend talking about just the fucking worst person on the planet.
And, we'd be open to hearing about we're open to any recommendations any of our 3 listeners and our family may have. So if you're a family member of ours and you're listening right now and you have a case you'd like us to cover,
please use the official email that will be included in the description. Do not text us about this.
Yeah, that's our personal number. We prefer you use our professional email, which we clearly haven't come up with yet.
It's originsofevil@gmail.com.
Well, there you go. Origins of email. Oh.
Once again, that's originsofevil@gmail.com. Send us any cases you would like us to discuss. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
I know I'm a licensed counselor, but please do not email me if you are in a crisis. I am not a counselor in this setting. Please go to the local emergency room or dial 911. Please don't send me those emails. And please don't send Paul any, cop emails.
I mean, listen, like you...
Yeah, by calling 911, I don't mean, ask for Paul.
No. You can ask me whatever questions you want, but, if it's an emergency, please call relevant authorities.
Yeah.
Don't wait for me to email you back. Please.
Yeah, he barely responds to me and I live with him, so. On that note,
I'm Paul Braun.
And I'm Megan Braun.
And remember, folks, never go to a second location. This has been episode 1 of
The Origins of Evil.